This is Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor. You're listening to Gallifrey Public Radio. Go and throw yourself under a bus. I didn't mean to say that. He told me to say that.
This is Gallifrey Public Radio, dedicated to positive enjoyment of Doctor Who. We travel through classic and new episodes, explore the extended universe, and play a few games from time to time. We do discuss news, content that has been officially released, and the occasional interesting rumor, but we'll warn you before anything considered spoilers comes up. Welcome to episode 518 of Gallifrey Public Radio. I'm Kier.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Julie. This week, on the cusp of the new Series 1 with the 15th Doctor, we wonder, who could they visit in a historical episode with the most entertaining, impactful, or even explosive results?
So, returning to GPR to hypothesize historically are friends you may have met if you've ever attended a Who convention in the United States in the last few years. It's Lee and Nathan of Pixel Who. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Hey,
Yay.
yeah, pleased to be here.
Raucous applause.
I'll insert that in post.
Thank you.
It has been a bit since we've had you speaking to us in the podcast format. We get to talk more often offline, which is great. But we wanted to have you in for the conversation as well, because we thought this might be an interesting topic to pick your brains on.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We've seen in the trailers, we know from some information about the episodes that are forthcoming that we're going to get some jaunts into the recognizable past. We're going to have something in the Regency era, so that Millie Gibson can make Bridgerton references as often as possible. And we'll have obviously our episode into the 60s, so that we'll have our Beatles intersect. So we know that the precedent has been set to be able to go back and do these sort of Earth past adventures. So in discussing the possibility of taking Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson, their characters particularly, and sort of their personas, what they've breathed into their characters we've seen thus far, where would you want to see them? Where would you want to see 15, maybe, and Ruby, or Ruby and the yet to be named additional companion we may see in series 2? Where would you like to see them go? Who would you like to see them meet?
You want to take it away?
Yeah, I think there are some gaps for sure. But, you can only visit so much of history in a given season. I honestly, especially with Ncuti, I don't know about necessarily Gibson's character yet. She's so relatively new. But I feel like Ncuti, you could definitely hit some queer icons. I think we haven't really delved into LGBTQIA history. And I feel like that's something, especially with the actor, and then just also how they've kind of been portraying this version of the Doctor being more more of an empathetic approach and much more emotionally conscious as well. I think that would be actually really good. Like, there's just so many icons that could be touched on. You could go, of course, Marsha P. Johnson and the Stonewall. Even Alan Turing is a good option as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think there's just a lot of history that isn't known, and the contribution of queer community members, especially really for so long, they just couldn't be out, publicly. They there's threats of being arrested or being put, or even being institutionalized. I mean, really, it's not until the 1970s that they stopped institutionalizing those who were just simply queer. But I think that's something that would be really well done with the current, with the showrunner coming back. Mm-hmm. And then with Ncuti, I think both of them would be really good and do well in being, providing some sensitivity when touching on these very major touchstones in history, and doing it in a way that makes it approachable for a public audience.
I'd want to see the Doctor being able to really support them and give them the hope that they weren't given during the times in which they lived. And I think that would be something that would be really inspiring. That, to me, harkens back to the Van Gogh episode where he struggled, and that it meant so much to all of us to get, because it's our type of fantasy that we love, mixed with the sci-fi travel, that you get to experience that love of them through this method of the art that we are observing. So I agree. I think that would be really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I think even like just hugging, like just having Chudy hug one of these characters and saying, it's going to turn out all right, sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Huge impact.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that we're already seeing just from the 60th specials when you had Rose show up, and the fact that her being trans was not only discussed but embraced. It's just like watching with my daughter and seeing her just almost break down was tremendous. So yeah, that's something I would love to see brought in more.
Yeah, I think I think that was their kind of stepping foot into that arena of better representation, more representation in media, and done in such a really lovely way, and making it almost like this is a family who's still trying to learn and trying to be open to learning about it, but then also it's kind of trying to make it every day. And I think that's the thing, like at some point it not needing to be said and announced all the time, but even just that that even that interaction between Tennant and the Meep, just saying like, oh, what are your pronouns? And they're like, pronoun is the article. Like the article is me. Yeah.
I am just the Meep.
Yes.
Right. You may refer to me as such.
And there may be something also to finding those opportunities for interactions with those historical figures that actually go even further back historically. So even if you take it, beyond the 20th century and go further back to show instances where we know of individuals who were in their own, in whatever small facet or capacity they could be, they were representative of of where they were in their lives, in their being for the time. Sometimes in direct opposition to the way standards were maintained, typically church-driven, but hey, that's kind of where we are. But it would also be something where it adds to that message about something that we know we always get bolstered by, which is this has been here the whole time. You've just chosen not to see it, or it has not been shown to you, or it has been completely wiped from the record.
Or deliberately ignored, yeah.
Correct. So it serves multiple opportunities in that regard.
Yeah, I think they definitely were kind of, exploring that area a bit with Bill Potts, especially when they traveled back and they met some of the Greek soldiers and who were like, oh, you're so provincial in the fact that you only like but one gender. And she was like, oh, okay, I guess being a lesbian is not that big of a deal to y'all. Like, and so they kind of like made a nod to that historical fact, which was nice. So I think it's been primed. And I think, especially with it being Russell T Davies and Chudy, it's definitely something that if you're going to kind of do this sort of exploration of this history, that's the team you want to have.
Oh, yeah. They'd be able to handle it sensitively, but also, weave an interesting narrative.
And be educational.
Yeah.
Be educational for a public.
Not too tangential from that, but like the idea I had, the historical figure I would love to see the Doctor go back and visit would be H.P. Lovecraft. And part of that is, one, I think it would be a fantastic story. Like we're seeing more spooky elements and fantastical stuff. And when else are you going to get a chance to show really creepy, scary aliens out there than with H.P. Lovecraft? And it would also give the Doctor a chance to, to oppose the racist and homophobic and things like that. And you could have H.P. Lovecraft being a purely adversarial person throughout the entire episode just to give the Doctor the chance to shoot him down at every turn. But also I think it would be really fun just to have that kind of supernatural, super creepy element to a story.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Kind of Blink-ish.
Yeah, and eldritch horror from the dawn of time is something Doctor Who does extremely well.
Right. Yeah, just when you thought you met the greatest superpower possible, there's this cosmic thing or this celestial thing or this eternal thing that's just a little bit larger than that one. And so was it a point of inspiration? Did he have a view into something we didn't? Was he an abductee? And we can go full X-Files with it. I don't know.
Plus, has the Doctor ever been to New England?
I mean, New York.
That's no, Jay.
That's-
I'm going to hand you a map again. I know you're a Texan.
It's
We're
up there.
not-
It's in that area. I'm just thinking geographically. Like, that's the closest I can think. I don't know.
We'll say northeast. Okay, well, we'll use a broader. Just sorry, Connecticut.
I'd want the tentacles to be something that were, like you're saying, a part of an alien or something explained scientifically, but then because he experienced it at whatever age, it just became the thing that just haunted him forever. And maybe the Doctor keeps visiting him again and again, and it's like, no, this is not real. Kind of like trying to help him through that.
Kind of War Doctor, like, just kind of keeps appearing underneath someone's bed, and they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or he's getting Lovecraft is getting all these ideas from things that he's witnessing, and the Doctor's trying to tell them this is all a figment of his imagination, and just go write it down. It's completely no. This is absolutely nonsensical.
People will eat it up. It's going to be great. You'll make lots of money.
Just change the name a little bit. We'll go with we're not going to call it a Cthulhu as it is. It's going to Cthulhu. Why don't you go with Cthulhu? That sounds creepy, right?
Yep, he'll just show up with a psychic paper saying he's representative of Miskatonic University.
Exactly.
There you go.
That's where it all came from.
And changes it enough so that the Shadow Proclamation can't be like, oh, you're outing us. It's still secret because we changed, some of the letters and
technically
the
change the
shape
name.
of the tentacles were different, so it's not copyright.
Right. Yeah. The Elder Gods started out in actuality really small. It was like the pating, little tiny thing, but in memory, it just gets larger and larger and larger. Julie, who had you been thinking about for revisitation?
So I went with a musical tie-in that I thought would be interesting and a little bit of that eccentric personality as we go through some of the history. And then I also think it would be fun to get to explore some of the more personality or behavioral stuff. So I went with Beethoven. I thought that would be a really interesting character for the Doctor to meet. And I think we saw Ruby playing the piano. And so anybody who plays the piano and does it well has heard Beethoven. And I think too that if some of the stories that we've heard from him are because he wrote journals because he started to lose his hearing. So dealing with that throughout his lifetime. And I just think that would be something that specifically Ncuti's Doctor would be interested in talking with him, exploring with him through some of what he has to struggle with and deal with, because it seems like from the 60th and what we've seen so far is exploring those hardships and having to deal with that kind of thing head on. And there are times where I think in some of the histories from Beethoven's life, you see him kind of disappear or suffer more, write less, create less. And so somewhat in the same touchstone as we saw with Van Gogh, you'd get to see the Doctor maybe visit, maybe just become a memory of some of that. And then some of that supernatural, fantastical at the end of his life. I know that there's some, whether it was true or not, the lightning strike, and then he sat up and sort of said some stuff. It would be interesting to see if that could tie into the fantasy elements that we're seeing now in the show that they're trying to introduce. That's like maybe that played into it. Maybe he becomes a ghost, which I know that there's stories about that too. So that would be really fun, I think.
Oh yeah, I can think of all kinds of possibilities there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of how they did with Van Gogh, where he showed the Doctor and Amy how he viewed the world and turning everything into that kind of Van Gogh painting. Do the same kind of thing where you have the point of view from Beethoven and just hear the music of the universe as he would hear it would be kind of fun.
Yeah. With and without his actual hearing. And did they maybe experiment with some stuff and that cause it? Who knows? Like, that could be really interesting.
Basically just give Murray Gold a whole bunch of money and be like, go nuts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could do so much with audio nowadays with that. It could be amazing if, one of the world's greatest musicians had to, sacrifice his hearing to save the earth,
Oh.
And then then the Doctor had to help him through dealing with it. And also he still figured out a way to hear it or produce what his life's goal was. But he couldn't tell anybody I saved the world. It was just, man, this is hard.
It almost touches upon like the conversation we had last time with Jess Jerkovic about the idea of the mathematics of music, and you could go that route. But you could also go the idea of something where you have such a consummate understanding of it that even when it's no longer actually being processed in an auditory sense, it becomes something where music has texture, it has color, it has those things, and you can almost transcend one sense to another in order to be able to manipulate it, construct it, craft it in the same fashion, and end up with something that's just as beautiful, or maybe even unusually beautiful because it's being approached from a non-conventional stance. So, yeah.
The Doctor builds a contraption to let Beethoven taste sound, and he's like, no, too much. Sure. I can't. This is too much.
Yeah.
There is a type of, and I can't recall what it's called, but there is a type of extrasensory that people are known to have where they can, like, they'll look at a name and then it's associated with color.
Synesthesia.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of interesting if there was like an auditory aspect.
I thought there was something so, because I thought
so too, yeah.
Taking it on a pop sense, I know the artist Pharrell Williams actually has something where he recognizes certain tones and sound blends to be a color palette.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that he does his compositions, is because he actually sort of sees them as all fitting within a particular tonal spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So
didn't a film just come out? I think it was on Disney, but like rhythm based. It's about the young dude who experiences the world through rhythm. I forget what it's called.
But it's coming. Yeah, it's supposed to come out soon, and it's the way he experiences the world through music. Yeah.
It'd be a fun journey.
So it would be kind of interesting to have that.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I mean, I think if you got Marigold on board, I mean, it's the time to do that as well.
Yeah. Lee, Nathan, did you have somebody else that you wanted to try to throw into the roster here?
I've always been fascinated by the story of Robert Smalls. Are you guys familiar with him? He was an enslaved person during the Civil War era who not only managed to free himself, he stole a Confederate warship and got himself and I think about 16 other people free into the North.
Yeah.
He later in life became one of the first African Americans to become a United States senator or a state representative.
I do recall this. Why do I know this? What was it? It was some sort of a recent piece of media or a recent.
His story's been circulating a lot recently because people keep discovering him and going, "Why isn't there a movie about this guy?"
Right. Okay.
Was it that pirate museum we went to in?
It might have been,
because technically it was piracy, stealing the ship and sailing, and I think it was in.
It's like black. It's referred to as everyone knows it as Blackbeard's Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. But it has all sorts of. I mean, we started picking up on all the "Our Flag Means Death" references. We're just kind of enjoying it in that regard. But there were all sorts of, from what you think you understand to some of the actual historical point of record for these individuals. And I think that's where the name might have come up because it was such a wild story.
It's crazy. Like that's just the surface level. The details get even stranger. But I could totally see Shooty having a great time hanging out with Robert Smalls.
Right. Yeah, because the story itself is so fantastic to begin with. You don't even have to modify that much. You just stick 2 additional characters in and you're done.
Yeah.
So.
The difficulty is, with any historical, especially like a pure historical, is, the TARDIS crew can't interfere too much and they can't help too much either.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, where do you draw the line in their involvement?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we just had Rosa a couple of years ago that did that same kind of thing. They're like, no, we really cannot interfere with this, but they still found a way to kind of weave them into the story. So, you don't want to mess with what happened too much because it is really cool. Like that sounds like an awesome story I want to see, but also it would be fun to see maybe a little bit of a sci-fi bent on it just so that they get somebody interested in the story, but then also like, all right, now I want to go and read what really happened because that sounds cool.
Right? Yeah, just the challenges of the Doctor navigating, the Confederate South as a black person. That creates all kinds of dynamics we've never seen before.
Right.
Yeah. The most they ever did was with Ryan in the Rosa episode. But I think this is a good opportunity to really do that. I think they tried to do a little bit with Bill Potts when they went back in Victorian era.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yes.
Frost area.
Yeah, where she was
And
just kind of
Capaldi
like,
punched a guy.
she was like, is this a problem? Because like, she's like, hello, I'm Melon in here. But I think this would be good because they would definitely be able to hit it kind of head on.
As a dork and a computer science degree holder and things like that, immediately I would think of somebody like Ada Lovelace. And the reason why I think that might be a kind of an interesting intersect between the Doctor and companions as well is because of the fact that on the surface, one of the basic historical connections to say, okay, this is the daughter of Lord Byron, famed poet, also a famed jackass, but whatever. So you put that as it is. So that's an interesting component. You can deal with this brilliant mind of this young woman who specifically has been given opportunities and training and education by her mother in direct defiance to her estranged, extremely famous father to say, all right, things of creativity and pomp and circumstance and formality, we're going to put all that aside. I want you to pursue things that you enjoy. If that's sciences, if that's mathematics, then that's absolutely what I want you to do because that's in direct defiance to your father.
She featured in Spyfall Part 2.
I was going to say with Jodie.
Although I felt like they could have done a lot more with her.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see her be the focal point of a story and have that kind of tie-in. Like, it's like, no, I met you once before, but I look different kind of thing. And like, really kind of dig into that. That would be fun.
Yeah, I think it could be a callback to make her the focal.
Yeah. She needed more airtime.
Well, because in Spyfall, what they end up doing is they introduce us to a handful of really fascinating characters that you get this little taste of, and you're like, all right, well, clearly they're sticking a pin in this because we want to utilize this later. You know, we had our code breaker, we had Lovelace, and we had help me with
the radio operator. What was her name? Yeah, the spy, right? What was her name?
Well, that was our code breaker, right?
Oh, maybe so.
A Khan. I can't remember her first name, but out of my head. I'll look it up later. But yeah, to be able to extend those things and say, no, all right. So clearly, even Chibnall saw the opportunity to say, no, these were fascinating individuals, and we want to be able and that they need to be somewhere in the Doctor's orbit, but not enough. We didn't get enough to be able to really unpack how interesting they were on a personal level too.
I would want for the introduction to go something like, oh, we've met before, and she goes, oh, I know. And not have,
that'd be cool.
like, I know who you are. Of course you are. This is, yes. Like have her
I
be
calculated
totally
the next time we were going to meet each other.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
And then here's what I have solved. Here's what you need. And then working together on the next thing. Something like that would just,
very cool.
I would
awesome.
want that. Yeah.
You get the fact that she is credited as being someone who worked alongside the creators of the difference engine, the first known, computing device that was ever developed by Babbage. She was alongside it, providing him with corrective notes, and wrote the first program to run on it. So it's just, she's credited for the beginning of what became an exponential rise in scientific and mathematical knowledge of computation that we're still on the upswing for. The rate is increasing, right? So you've got someone like the Doctor who is this manifest of technology to an unfathomable degree, looking at this almost with a sense of, you go, little humans, look at you taking your first steps here. Good on you, girl, get it. But at the same time, she has a bit of this kind of tragedy about her as well. I mean, she died at the age of 36 from uterine cancer. We didn't get an opportunity to see everything that she could have contributed. So you have that element of what has been accomplished, but also so much that could have been. And you could even wrestle with what if she was just there for a little while longer? What if that timeline were extended ever so slightly? What would that do for things? So you could have that kind of a plot line struggle in that regard, particularly with a companion that isn't quite grasping the whole idea of the fixed point yet. So you could have that conversation. I know it comes up a lot, but it's still always interesting every time you see a new character try to come to terms with it and say, no, but Doctor, it's right there. You could do it right now. You could fix this. So I thought it was kind of an interesting shot. Has anybody else got any runners up they'd like to throw in the mix?
Not so much historical, but like I would love to see just a brief cameo from, either like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson. Just
Oh yeah.
that I was thinking Carl Sagan, and then I'm like, it's a little too recent. Trying to find somebody to play him, that could get a little bit weird. But like, having a known scientist that like spends a lot of time focusing on space and things like that would be fun.
Phil
to
Plait.
have. Yeah.
Let's say Phil Plait or Brian Cox. Why couldn't he just actually be like they wander through one of his lectures, and he's there.
He has been with the cubes. They used an interview from him as a
they
placeholder.
did.
So he could now actually get to like go in the TARDIS, and that would be
Absolutely. And
listener, I
he's
am
a
pointing
musician.
at the camera saying yes.
He's a musician too, so you could tie him into a musical episode.
Yeah.
We've got I'm blanking on the name of the actor who plays Mrs. Flood, but she's married to Professor Brian May of Queen. So because they both appeared on the red carpet. Yeah, and everyone
He's
saw
got to
him.
be in it. It's
Everyone's-
beyond time.
Exactly. Well, people saw him at the red carpet event. That means that he's going to be in an upcoming episode. And they're like, nah, he's just married to her. He's just following his wife around because he's super proud of everything she's doing. So just put a lid on that for a minute.
Oh, they're doing an episode with the Beatles. Why can't they do an episode with Queen? That'd be amazing.
Precisely. Yeah. I also wondered too. This may be. I'm of dual minds on this. On one hand, I would really love to actually find out what the recurring relationship was with Houdini that has transcended multiple Doctor iterations. But on the second hand, maybe I don't want to know it. And I just want it to be that running gag.
I think the Doctor is allowed to have some secrets, and that's one of them. Yeah.
No. Eventually, it'll all come out in Big Finish.
Probably.
Yeah.
Anyone else, or any time else, or any event else?
I don't know why my brain keeps going to authors, but why not Jules Verne?
We danced
could have
close.
Yeah, I mean, we could have some fun with that one.
Are you wanting some steampunk? Is that like you want a little bit more insertion of steampunk?
I mean, who
I
doesn't?
mean, yeah, like complete TARDIS redesign at this point. Like Jules Verne comes on, goes, no, I've got some ideas.
Yeah, he walks into the TARDIS and goes, "No, it's all wrong."
That would have been the gap between 9 and 10. That's how the interior got quite so grungy.
Yeah.
For 10.
That's canon now in my mind.
Yeah.
That's
Just
the
one
visit
trip with
that
Verne.
There was
happened.
actually a lot more like gilded gold that Jules had put in, and like the 10th.
The McGann TARDIS was very, very, very Jules Verne.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from the author standpoint, that's always a fun one to be able to utilize because it's a matter of was it an inspiration, was it a fever dream, was it what was it that gave you these ideas that no one had decided to put down on paper before? But you do the same thing with filmmakers along the way. There's all kinds of interesting things.
I almost feel like my concern with Jules, my only small concern with Jules Verne, it would set the internet like ablaze because everybody would then connect that to Tenet, 80 Days Around the World, and they would think that he would make a reappearance. Like, I feel like people would go into this, like, like
Right, because-
corkboard with yarn.
Because
you know?
Whovians have never
Tenant's
done
always
that.
just around the corner.
Yeah, we've never made 16 leaps ahead of who the next person was going to show up. Yeah.
You make
He's just
enough
lurking
crackpot
offset.
theories. The shotgun method says you're eventually going to hit something. So, yeah. I think, and thinking on a global scale too. I mean, we tend to think of things in a lot of because of who we are and how we've been educated and so forth. That we look at things from a very Western civilization viewpoint. But there's got to be, as we saw with things like the Legend of the Sea Devils, we get an opportunity to get exposed to historical characters of particular import from well outside your Anglo-Saxon background. So having those kind of opportunities coming up in the future would be great too, because it's as we were saying earlier in the conversation, it gives that opportunity for someone to say, "Oh, I didn't even know about that sort of thing before," and then they get their research mind gets to go and pursue new things.
I'm still waiting for an East Asian companion. I haven't gotten that yet. Still waiting. Yeah, I appreciate the Sea Devils. It was like the first time I was like, oh, look, they're doing a little bit more. I feel like, I don't know if just Doctor Who's really afraid of broaching that after the Talons situation, but they seem to be very cautious ever since in utilizing East Asian characters or East Asian history. And I kind of would love representation, but also a little bit maybe more modern day as well. Because I think there's this tendency that when people think of East Asia, it's automatically a very specific era. Like, it's nothing modern. It's like people with accents and, very, dramatic outfits and stuff like that. But there isn't a lot of modern.
I mean, you could do an amazing story set in like modern Singapore airport.
Yeah, yeah.
And that place
honestly,
is a
that
world
just
unto itself.
Yeah, that's that's just set dressing by itself.
It would be an incredible location.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, so I find that that's kind of where I haven't really seen it. I was really excited about Yaz because it, with that population being so underrepresented, especially in Doctor Who, and especially the fact that they are like a major minority population in the UK, and they'd never really had a companion who represented that background. I think I'm just kind of still waiting because we almost got it with the 8th, didn't quite happen, sort of thing. So I'm just kind of waiting for the modern day. But yeah, I mean, it might just be me hoping. I'm like, hey, I'm available, guys.
Do we think, though, that it would need to come from the writer's room where someone could write that story properly with care and the delivery that would be appropriate in order to make that happen?
I think so. I mean, they had done that with Rosa, which is why Rosa came out so well. I think they need to have a writer that can kind of be representative, but also like speak a little bit about those sort of things. I think what becomes difficult is that it's varied depending on which, Asian country you're going to go with, because Chinese culture is not the same as Vietnamese culture. It's not the same as Japanese culture. They're all variable. I mean, we get put in a pot together, but realistically, it's all different cultures, different languages. I can't speak any other language, outside of Vietnamese and English. So it's interesting. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I would just like some sort of representation. Like, I'm kind of okay wherever. Yeah. And honestly, if they just don't do Yellowface, they're already like miles ahead from what they've done in the past.
Now, I wonder if things like the novelization translations coming through, like Three Body Problem and some of that other stuff, will encourage more of that, either translation or just sharing of those types of stories, which, having read it, and that's all I've got so far about it, though, is it's a different approach and just a different writing style. But there's obviously interest in the science fiction, the fantasy, that kind of like the same interests that we have and that this show is based around. So I definitely feel like there could and should be crossovers and inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Or even to your point, Lee, about the idea of trying to identify each of these regions and cultures individually, so that they're not just lumped together. A story that may in some way give them an identity in and of themselves, so that it's like almost the intent of the episode is to try to get people to sort of see the striations and the things that make them unique. I think it's kind of a difficult thing to try to keep fast-paced, dramatic, and woo. But yeah, there's a ton of material.
That's kind of one of the things I really liked about, say, Demons of the Punjab. That was a section of history that I didn't know much about, that I then went and learned a lot more about because it was featured in Doctor Who. Yeah, and yeah, the whole historical context surrounding partition was really interesting.
I did the exact same thing with that. It's like, it was something I had heard the term, but never knew exactly what it related to. And so watching that episode, it was just like, oh, I have to go and learn things now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to celebrate the differences and everything that comes with that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to insert one more, hope is, honestly, better nurse representation.
Yeah. Take this apart for us.
So what often happens with, general population understanding of nurses, most people's interaction with a nurse is usually like a school nurse or maybe an urgent care, that sort of thing. Most people don't understand what nurses actually do at the hospital bedside. For like the listeners at home who are unaware, I'm a registered nurse last 12 years. And I think part of the issue is that media showing nurses, like in any of these medical shows, the nurses aren't there. I'm just going to be frank. They're just not there. And if they are, they're just kind of like in the background pushing an IV pole or something. And a lot of the stuff that the doctors do is actually what nurses actually do. And the issue is a lot of the consultants for these shows and movies are physicians. And so they never get a nurse perspective. So there's very few examples of what it is that nurses do and what we contribute. Prior to the pandemic, if you looked up nurse in Google Images, it was like nothing but like sexy Halloween costumes. Like that's how our field had kind of been viewed. So what I found interesting was that people aren't aware of just the major historical figures of nursing that changed the field of medicine and nursing. It wasn't just nurses. Like people know Florence Nightingale, of course, but her major contribution was sanitary practices. More people died in the Crimean War from infection than like the actual war itself until she put in these sanitary practices that we still use now. People don't realize like, hey, maybe don't reuse the same towel. Like, it's like things like you go, this is so basic now, but like in 1850 something, it wasn't. And even things like jaundice, the cure for jaundice was found by a nurse, and it was actually an English nurse, Nurse Jean Ward. And so you have like these you have the, even something as massive as the AIDS epidemic, a lot of those victims in the US, they were quarantined and isolated and left alone to just kind of die on their own. And it was nurses who said, nope, absolutely not, and showed compassion and stayed with those patients, risked whatever, because we didn't know how they were spread at that time, but said, no, these patients should not die alone. These patients should not be alone, and actually show compassion and that it was safe, to be around patients who had AIDS, especially in that time where there was so much fear around it. But it's just things like, the nurse who helped with polio, the nurse who, there's a lot of things that kind of has been overwritten in media representation, and people don't realize how massive the contribution of nursing has been to modern day practices and stuff like that. And so like I was really excited when Rory came along. I was like, yeah, we have a nurse as a main character.
They never did much with that aspect of his
They never
character,
did that much,
yeah.
right? Like they kind of showed it here and there, but like, it's this like reality of I'm like, I don't know how to tell people. I'm like, the first person to do CPR on you in the hospital is a nurse usually, because we're the ones at bedside. It takes like 10 minutes or so before a doctor comes along. So like we're running that code until that point. But yeah, so I kind of want to delve more into that and have better representation, especially with a doctor who is so, openly emotional and very
The doctor needs a nurse.
Yes,
to
exactly.
travel in the TARDIS with him.
Always.
The definite article, the nurse.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you had, it could be an adversary, which would be amazing. It's the doctor versus the nurse.
The Big Finish audios did feature a nurse character named Molly.
Molly Sullivan, in the whole Dark Hour series.
Molly O'Sullivan.
Yeah. She had a lovely Irish accent. But and that was during the First World War era, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it would be cool to expand on that.
Yeah.
And again, similarly with Rory, she was never given much opportunity to be able to actually utilize her medical knowledge.
Medical skills. Yeah. Maybe because writers don't know much about medicine.
Right. I think
you need to have a nurse consultant.
I think if I would want to see some sort of story where there's something that not one nurse can solve, and so they go through time and pick them all up and put the brain trust in the TARDIS and give them the space to just think and solve. And again, it's about what this show is about to me is always bringing the right people together in the room. And so put them together, let them realize that their knowledge has built upon each other, and they all look back at whoever it is that was the first actual nurse to pick up the title of it, or wherever the name came from. And they all like tip of the hat, nod, and then they just get to work and then make whatever it is happen and solve the whole episode or what have you. But yeah, that's the kind of epic story I want. I'm not a writer, so someone needs to do it.
But you've got the underpinnings of your dramatic moments right there. You've got individuals who, anyone else, you put them into a TARDIS interior and they're just standing there agog for 90 seconds while they're trying to process everything. You get a bunch of nurses in there in a crisis situation and they don't have time.
They're like, right. Yeah. Where's the stuff?
They'll look at the crazy room when it's over.
Can I work on this, please? So,
but you get at the very end, before they all get returned to their time, and they get to keep their memories slightly. Like it's one of those like don't talk a lot about it, but you see them in that moment of peace that they never get in their time, having tea, having something together in that moment of just camaraderie to say, I know you, I see you, and then here you go back to make your difference, do what you can, and they know they have that.
You have each one of them if they're taken from across the timelines, right? You start working chronologically backward as each one from modern era thanks the one from immediately prior for what they had done. That one thanks the one prior. That one thanks the one prior, and you see that compound that has happened over generations, over centuries, to bring modern medicine to where it is in the hands of people who genuinely care for you when it matters most.
Yeah. They get back to the end of the line. There's Hippocrates.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think especially because nurses, I mean, we care for other people, but we try really hard to care for one another. So like when you're talking about recovery from coding a patient that didn't make it, that sort of thing, we do band together and support one another and kind of just hold a space for each other. And I think that's something that I love the idea of like that sort of timeline and going back and having them kind of connect with the past that has kind of led to modern day nursing, and actually having that sort of nod and recognition. Like it's definitely something that is a very nurse thing.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah. Whoever's listening, you have all permissions to make that real.
Yes. And you're more than welcome to contact me to be a consultant. I'm more than happy.
Julie, that's a segue if ever
I know, yeah. So one thing we do like to do towards the end here is to ask, if you were want to be found, where would we allow our listeners to direct their attention to find you, Lee and Nathan?
Yes. So we have, if you go to pixelwho.com, that takes you to our shop page, but we are also on Facebook as Pixel and then on Instagram as Pixel Our Instagram is a mix of like convention stuff, but then just our personal stuff too. So you get a little insight of that. / I was really lazy about trying to make my own and make one for Nathan. So we just kept the business one and that's what we use on Instagram. We're also on Twitter / X, whatever it wants to call itself now, as Pixel Art, only because someone sat on our handle. So that's the one we ended up with. But also we're not really much on that anymore. I think we're heavy more on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, so we're definitely always at a lot of conventions.
Yes, if you go to a Doctor Who convention, we are likely there.
Yes, yeah. So we'll be at Long Island Who coming up, Chicago TARDIS, of course Gallifrey, one of our favorites every year. And then just even like random appearances of show, like we do GalaxyCon.
Long Island Trek.
Yep, we're also coming up and we're going to be at Long Island Trek as well, because we are fans of many other fandoms, as geeks are. But yeah, so you'll see us a lot of convention circuits. You can also find us online. And yeah, we're one of those people that like love to talk geeks and love to like just, get to know everyone and get to know what their favorites are and that sort of thing. So definitely feel free to always kind of chat us up. We're more than happy to have those like fun conversations because I don't get to have that at work otherwise. So it's a nice break for me.
Yeah.
Can confirm they collect people.
Yes.
And Nathan's been recognized. Like he's moving on up.
Yes. Yeah. We were at this last Gallifrey. We went to Disneyland and like he got recognized outside of the convention circuit.
That was unusual. Yeah. So someone ran up to me and said, "Hey, are you Nathan from Pixel Who?" Like, yeah. And he goes, "Oh, I have some of your art. It's great." And they ran off. And I was actually at the time I was standing next to Brian Herring, who's
the puppeteer from Meep.
Yeah, and who watched this exchange, watched the guy run off, and kind of went, "Hey, I'm the Meep."
So we need to keep that energy going, like always.
Yes.
Just, hey, are you Nathan from Pixel Who? Yeah, run away, and then it's great.
Well, if you've been listening to this and have ideas for your own historical people that you want to see pop up in the show, reach out to us and let us know. Hit us up on our social medias. You can catch them all in the outro of the show. Let us know what you think would be the ideal place for the Doctor to go, or the person that the Doctor should meet.
And if you get it right, we'll buy you a Pixel Who poster.
Huzzah.
And we might be able to get it signed. I think we know.
I think that can be arranged.
I think we know someone. Yeah.
might know somebody. Might have a connection.
Might know somebody. Yeah.
I know a guy.
This has been episode 518 of Gallifrey Public Radio. Until next time, this is Jay saying, I just can't wait for the Doctor to go back to Isaac Newton and fix this whole Mavity thing.
Yes.
You keep that lantern lit, Jay. It's going to work out great.
You took my line.
And this is Kira saying, the opportunity is still there to rectify one of the greatest wrongs and have this beautiful Black Doctor meet the Thin White Duke.
Ooh.
They can't. I don't know. They can't see your shirt.
I'm wearing my Bowie shirt today. If you don't know who the Thin White Duke is, there is your opportunity to go out and learn something new and more.
This is Julie saying, I just have to figure out what menu we're doing for meal planning around these episodes where we've got to go back in history. So I just need some info so I can get on that.
Mm-hmm. Thematic meals, always.
Yes, always.
We'll see you next time.
LLZ.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Gallifrey Public Radio. As a fan-run podcast, your thoughts and opinions are part of the conversation. Leave us a comment or review on your preferred podcast app, find us on social media to message us, or visit GallifreyPublicRadio.com for email and voicemail contacts. We'll see you out there in time and space.
Hi, this is Jacob. This recording of Gallifrey Public Radio is copyrighted in 2024. GPR is a fan-owned, fan-produced podcast. We'll see you next time!
Hello, this is Matt calling. I'm just calling in today regarding the new Doctor. It's been a little bit since I've watched the Christmas special a few times, and my 3 words for him are flirty, energetic, and sassy. He's got all 3, and I can't wait to explore where he's going to take the show. Sad news about Ruby Sunday being leaving after 1 season, but hey, show business, things happen, you never know why. Also, I liked how in the Christmas special they touched on it's bigger on the inside without actually having to say it, where she just ran back outside and kind of touched the side and went, huh, and went back in. Anyways, love the show, can't wait to hear more, and keep up the good work. Thanks. Bye.